Hi, I'm Kieran. I'm passionate about learning and education. My mission is to help 100,000 businesses leverage digital technologies to make an impact on the world. I do that by helping businesses better understand intelligent automation, emerging technologies, and LinkedIn social media strategy. This helps dramatically improve their operational efficiency, profitability, and visibility. Today, I'm going to introduce Dean Murphy, who I'm going to talk about how to build a robust business case for RPA and IA. Dean has been in the industry for years. Dean, that's not putting any age on you at all. We're looking forward to your experience here. Dean, welcome.
Thank you.
Great to
Thank
see
you,
you.
Kieran. You too.
Dean, for those who don't know you, sir, would you mind introducing yourself and telling the audience a little bit more about what you've done and what you're currently doing?
Yeah, so I'm Dean Murphy. I currently work for an organization called ABP Consultancy, and I work in a pre-sales capacity, so working with existing and prospective customers to understand where they are on their intelligent automation journey and how ABP can help them to get started or progress in what they're doing. But my background, I've been working in this kind of role for over 20 years now. And most of that time has actually been working with organizations on helping them improve their business, their efficiency and so on. Back from the early days of when I first got into things like mobile technology, helping people be productive away from their desk. Then I worked for an organization that provided workforce management solutions to organizations with field service engineers, helping them to optimize the time of their people and to give them what was called more wrench time, more time doing the job rather than traveling to and from, and making sure the right person with the right skills was there. And then more laterally within the automation field, so really helping organizations do more with less.
Just as you're leaning in there, I love that term, more wrench time, by the way. Everybody assumes automation is a recent thing, but what you're describing there is lots of different types of automation that have been around for years. Is that the case, or am I wrong, Dean?
No, absolutely. And a lot of it for me is about efficiency. And I define that as being people working on the right things and then doing those things right. And if there's ways in which we can augment how they go about doing those things through intelligent computer software, then no, ideal. We essentially take, to use a UiPath term, we take the robot out of the person.
There's a lot of robot in me now. I just see the stuff I have to do. So you're right. But automation, all those things you talked about, mobiles and workflow and RPA and intelligent automation, they all cost money, and we can't get away from that. How have you built the business case for automation for all those businesses over the last 20 years? How do you build it to stack up and make sense so that they're getting what they want and what they need for their business?
The key thing is to think about these things as a strategic imperative for the organization and not just a tactical thing, or in some cases, what some organizations think of as a sticking plaster, where they're going to use technologies like automation and robotic process automation to address a short-term problem they have within their business. Because I always try to use an analogy. And if we had a business problem within the business that we needed more people to solve, we would hire people in, or we would contract people in. And when we think about automation, we're thinking about a digital workforce. And so a digital workforce shouldn't really be considered anything different to a human workforce. Essentially, we're augmenting our workforce to allow us to address the business challenges that we face. So it's important that we think about things in those terms. And we also think about, rather than think about one use case, and I think about the time when I first joined UiPath, I would often get brought into deals where the customer was interested in automating one business process. So UiPath would sell them one robot, one studio to build it, and let them get on with it. But for me, I always felt that there was a bigger opportunity for our customers than just those one robot, one use case scenarios. So for me, it's a lot about how can we help an organization understand the potential for automation within the business, understand how to build a business case for that, and then how to realize the benefits you derive. And in most cases, it's not just about taking cost out of the business, not taking people out of the business. It's more about freeing those people up to do higher value activities. because if you said to somebody, "Can I take this job away from you? Would you be able to work 4 days a week?" Probably not. They're probably working more than their contracted hours to get through all the work that they've got. So it's all about thinking about automation as a strategic objective within the organization.
Do you think people struggle to understand automation? Because it's your and my natural language, but intelligent automation, workflows, process mining, those aren't natural terms. And if they do struggle, Dean, how do you educate them on the art of the possible to use the tooling as a strategic support or a strategic delivery mechanism?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that part of the problem is the term robotic and robotic process automation. It conjures up kind of the worst of Hollywood or the best of Hollywood, depending on your perspective. Is it going to turn into Skynet and take over the world? Is it going to just go off and go rogue and do its own thing? And so a lot of it comes down to how can we help demystify what this is, help people to understand what it really is and what value it can bring and how it can help them in their day-to-day lives. So one of the approaches that I've used is an introduction to automation, typically about a 1-hour presentation where I would take an organization through what really is automation and how to start to think about the things that you do and could they be automated. By doing that, we remove some of the fear factor. I also try to introduce proof points as well. So if somebody's working in finance, can I show them what a finance process would look like automated? If somebody's working in HR, can I show what a HR process would look like automated? So that we start to help people to see that through a lot of things like user interface-based automation, essentially the robot is doing the things that you do and will only do the things that you tell it to in the way that you do them today. Now, of course, there's more to automation than just automating what you do within the user interface. But sometimes when we show people the robot is essentially just a digital worker on your machine, helping you out with the things that you do, it really helps to demystify what is automation.
I like that. What else do you do to get people to understand the art of the possible, to build that business case, Dean? Are you looking at, design thinking? Are you looking at storytelling? What are all the dark arts, as it were, that you apply to get people educated on what's possible and practical?
Yeah, so there are a number of techniques that I use. The first of which is often demystify through the introduction to automation. And then I run things like automation process discovery workshops. Sit down with a team, maybe from finance or from HR, and spend time listening to them talk about the things that they do, and then capture those ideas and help them to understand how, I'm not sure whether this is a real word, how automatable are those processes? Can we automate them? Or are there some things that they're doing in there that just require far too much human judgment for where they are on their automation journey? And should we find lower hanging fruit? So the more kind of simple, more repetitive, mundane things that they're doing. And when I've done this with other organizations, I've done it with the NHS, with retailers, with food delivery organizations. I've done it with a variety of companies. And in many cases, we end up with dozens, if not more, automation use cases that can start to fill their automation backlog. In fact, one of the examples I'd like to share with you is with a shoe manufacturing company that I spent some time with. It was pre-COVID, back in the days when we ran these workshops face-to-face, although we are getting back to those now. We went up there, we spent a day with them, we introduced them to automation, so we demystified. And then we spent about an hour and a half to 2 hours with each department, and just getting them to talk through some of the things that they were doing. And in that workshop, we could probably capture some in the region of 30 automation candidates, so quite a lot. And back in those days, we were using a spreadsheet to capture them, although now we use more intelligent tools such as Automation Hub from UiPath. So we left them that evening, and we came back the following day, and they'd taken that spreadsheet and they'd added another 12 use cases to it. So they were so energized and enthusiastic about what was happening. They actually took the time and the initiative in their evenings to go ahead and add to that. And so that really demonstrates the power of these kind of workshops where you demystify and you help people get started building an automation mindset. What was interesting there was we had some very good stakeholder engagement, including the managing director of the organization. In fact, during the workshop, he came in and to see how things were going. And he told us a small anecdote that had happened to him the day before. The HR director had come into his office and said, I need 2 more people in my department. And the managing director turned around and said, well, you can't have 2 people, you can have 2 robots. And so that top-down thinking of automation as a strategic objective within the organization is very, very powerful. And some of the other organizations have done with this, we end up with 40 or more automation candidates. And in many cases, when we start to build out the business case, we can start to see that there's tens of thousands of hours locked up in these automation candidates.
I can just imagine what I would do with 10,000 extra hours a year if I had a business.
Absolutely, yeah.
So much more. So it probably leads me into 2 questions, just going off what you're saying. What are the ingredients then to make a successful program? So education sounds like one,
Yes.
executive support from the top sounds like the other.
Yes.
Enthusing people and getting them excited seems like another. But what else is there, Dean? What's the ingredients, the magic beans to a really great automation program?
I think the key thing is, it's communication and change management. Of course, people's roles will change slightly. They're not going to spend as much time doing those repetitive, boring tasks. So they're going to do, hopefully more interesting and high value things that require them to use their brain rather than their fingers on the keyboard and mouse. And I think sometimes some people enjoy some of the repetitive, mundane tasks. And so we've got to help them to realize that there is a personal benefit to this in terms of their career. And in fact, again, another story I'd like to share. I was working with one of the Scottish county councils, and we'd run a similar workshop, the process discovery workshop. And the following day, on the second day, we built out an automation from one of the automation candidates that had come out on the first day of the workshop. So one of my colleagues, one of our more technical colleagues, was working alongside somebody from their HR department, automating one of the activities this person did. And at the end of the day, we went round and asked people for their the feedback and what they got out of the workshop. And the HR girl that we'd been working with, she said, this has been the best day of my working life. I can see this job that I really hate doing being automated, and now I can do more interesting things. So, but one of the problems is that we often get locked into a silo within the organization. So we may talk to finance, we may talk to HR, we may talk to sales, to marketing, to customer service. And quite often what I found is that some of the things that we get involved in are just an output from another department. And so we do something to automate an output from somebody else, and then we pass it on as an output from ourselves and as an input into somebody else. And so one of the challenges we face is, how do we start to think about an end-to-end or fully automated enterprise? And so again, thinking about some of the techniques that we use to engage with customers to make them successful is to start to think about things like end-to-end customer journeys or end-to-end user journeys, and start to think about what experience do people have today? What experience would we like them to have? And how can we then bring technology to bear to help to deliver those outcomes? So using techniques like design thinking, empathy mapping, to build out a picture of what the business looks like today from a user perspective or from a customer perspective, and then try to solve the problems from that angle. And in many cases, we will then identify areas where we don't need to automate in finance because we fixed it elsewhere within the organization. Again, I'd like to give you an example. I worked with an e-commerce organization, and we were doing some automation in finance, and the logistics team were interested in what was happening. So they talked about some of their processes. And one of the things they talked about was chasing missing parcels. So I said, okay, well, how do you know it's a missing parcel? Well, customer service tell us. So an output from customer service, this parcel is missing, is an input into logistics. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, well, what happens when you finish your bit? Let's say, for example, the parcel has been lost. Oh, we then pass it on to finance, and finance then arrange a refund from the courier. So this one process actually touches 3 different departments: customer service, logistics, and finance. I said, well, what if we tackle this from a customer service perspective? a customer complains that a parcel is missing, what if customer service can then trigger something that goes and checks with the courier where something is? You guys never need to get involved. So we started to work with them around how can we start to think about cross-department and end-to-end automation from a customer experience perspective rather than just from a siloed perspective.
Oh, I really like that example. It leads me on to a question then, Dean. What are the things that are preventing businesses from scaling? We've got the initial enthusiasm, we've got 40, 50 ideas, and then sometimes in programs, they just stop. You've mentioned silos.
Yes.
You also mentioned, I'm assuming, executive support if that disappears, but what are the things that what are the things to avoid is probably my question more than anything else. So
Yes.
People don't trip themselves up at the start or in the middle or near the end.
Yeah, we see a lot of focus on the cost, the upfront cost. I think this is one of those solutions where there is an element of speculate to accumulate. But the return on investment, in many cases, when executed in the right way, will significantly outweigh the initial investment that you make. So focus on the outcome and the benefits to the business, the improvements that it can make with your customers, your employees. A happier employee is more likely to be retained. Think about other factors. In many cases, I feel projects fail because they focus on how am I going to take people out of the business, and that's the one metric that they focus on, nothing else. When in fact we've got improving customer service, avoiding cost, increasing revenue, helping with things like customer satisfaction. It's much cheaper to retain a customer than it is to acquire a new customer. And same with employees. When we think about the cost of retaining, of hiring and training and retaining employees, that's a big cost of the business. So when we think about it, think about your end-to-end business case, not just on, well, I've now got 5 robots working for me, so I can remove 10 people from the business. Because there's more to what you can achieve as a business through automation than just taking people out of the business. Again, another example. I buy a lot of stuff from Amazon. I buy from Amazon not always because they're the cheapest place, but because the customer service is second to none. If something's not right, I return it, I get a refund. It's such a frictionless experience. And the problem is that organizations like Amazon, Uber, and others are creating the expectation that many people have in the level of service they expect from other organizations. So can we as an organization get closer to the Amazon-like experience, even though we're in a non-competitive market?
But what about improving automation in the public sector, healthcare sector, massively underfunded, massive demand for each of those services? Have you examples of where intelligent automation, RPA, made a really wholesome big impact on either of those or both of those areas?
Yeah, there's a couple of examples. I've got one from the NHS. Again, we'd done a discovery session with, in this case, with the HR team, and we'd agreed that we were going to build out some automations for them. And one of the ones we prioritized was to do with what are called job variance letters. So in the NHS, if you change department or your role changes, you get promoted, maybe you move to a different ward, you need like an addendum to your contract, and these are called variance letters. The team that I was working with had to issue these variance letters before payroll deadline. Now, they were running weekly payrolls in some cases. So in many cases, they had to down tools and everything to focus on getting these variance letters issued. Now, it wasn't just a case of issuing the letter. They needed to get things like approvals from the manager, approvals from finance. So there's about 3 approvals that they needed. And so they had a spreadsheet where they would track all the approvals, and they had to chase them on a regular basis before they could then essentially copy paste data from this spreadsheet into the variance letter, issue it, get a copy sent to payroll, copy sent to the manager, copy sent to the employee. And when payroll deadline came around, everything was down tools. Now, this team had another challenge, which was to do with job descriptions. They had something like 400 job descriptions for 200 job roles. So they had an issue when a hiring manager wanted to hire somebody. The hiring manager would just choose a job description, and invariably they would choose the wrong one because they didn't know which one was the latest and greatest. But this team wanted to rationalize the job descriptions, deduplicate, and just get the correct version or correct variants of those job descriptions out onto the intranet so that hiring managers would choose the right one. But they couldn't do it because this job variance letter was the priority every time payroll deadline came around on a weekly basis. So we automated part of that process. We automated the reminders to the managers so we could remind them to send their approvals. And once the approvals were in, then we automated the generation of that job variance letter, emailing it to the employee, to payroll, and to the manager. The view to give them time to do those higher value activities, and the rationalization of job descriptions would have a positive impact on the hiring manager, the people that are being interviewed, the HR team that then have to onboard them, the payroll team that have to pay them based on the grade and the experience that they've got. It had a material impact up and down the organization. But again, when you think about it, if we'd have looked at it just in that silo of HR, we wouldn't have been thinking about those other aspects. Another example is in the early days of COVID. We were working with a central function within the NHS, and they set up a shared email inbox nationally for NHS England for hospitals to be able to request personal protective equipment, or PPE. So the hospitals would fill in a spreadsheet that would have a template of a form of the different types of PPE they could request, and they would email that into a national shared inbox. And then there was a team of 5 people that would then go through those emails, copy and paste the data from the spreadsheet into a ticketing system. They would then triage and prioritize those requests and then get on with source and supply. It was taking between 5 and 8 minutes to process each incoming request in terms of just getting the data from the email into the ticketing system. And we had a call with the NHS on a Friday, and we understood the process, asked some questions, found some areas where we could help to improve the process. And one of the UiPath business partners at the time started to implement this. They went live the following Thursday. The 200 message backlog that had been there on the Friday when we had the original call was then 2,000 messages within a week. So this team were just really inundated with requests. So they set 4 robots to work on this. They cleared that backlog within 48 hours. But more importantly, that team was able to focus on the source and supply of personal protective equipment, helping to protect the lives of frontline NHS staff.
Dean, sometimes we just think of robots in commercial terms, big business, whatever else. We forget them in terms of impacting and maybe protecting lives as well. Fascinating.
Yes,
and I love the examples.
Yes, and there are many, many examples in local government, central government, healthcare, as education, as well as as you say, in all those commercial organizations.
So, Dean, if people wanted to find out themselves, all these use cases and all these examples, and I think in 25 minutes we've listed about 10 or 15, it shows you the art of the possible. Yeah. How would they find out a little bit more about you? How would they get in touch with you to connect, to do something with you and the team that you represent?
Yeah, so connect with me on LinkedIn. There's no obligation. If you just want to have a conversation, just know where are you on your automation journey, or even think about it. Do you need some help demystifying or getting started with some of your process discovery? Myself and my colleagues at ABP Consultancy are more than happy to engage with you. And a lot of those workshop formats that I talked about, the session to demystify, the introduction to automation, the process discovery workshops, we offer those as a joint investment of people, time, and knowledge. I tried to avoid using the word free because free has no perception of value. But as I say, that joint investment of people, time, and knowledge, we're more than happy to come along and work with you to run some of those workshops to help you to see what is the art of the possible in your organization, and how can you get started with your automation journey.